So I made a post asking people to help me verify who initially saw it so I could make some phone calls. Almost right away, somebody responded and said, I live nearby there, I'm gonna drive out and take some pictures. The person took some pictures, sent them to me, and that led me to call FEMA. FEMA sent me a response later on that night, which was kind of embarrassing. It was one paragraph, didn't really say much at all. So the next morning I woke up and someone else from FEMA, who I have worked with in the past, a PR person who handled an interview, said, hey, listen, maybe I can provide you some more context and information. So I'm gonna take you through and read you what the questions were and what the responses were. Number one, FEMA referred to the water as surplus. Made a lot of people upset. Why would they say surplus, given the fact that this comes almost 2 years after Hurricane Maria, when so many people for so long were so desperate to get food and water? All right, here we go. FEMA wrote to me. Number one, what is surplus? Their answer. The Food and Drug Administration and the Federal Acquisitions Regulations regulates bottled water. When water is 120 days near its expiration date, FEMA is required to surplus the water. Once identified, all surplus water is posted on a government website for donation or sale to federal agencies, state governments, local agencies, and nonprofits. According to the Federal Acquisitions Regulations, when the agency is not able to sell or donate the water through the GSA process, government process, it is responsible for disposing of it, and in this case, FEMA contracted with PR Drilling and Supplies, which is based in Bayamon, for the disposition of the water. All right, my next question. Is FEMA, I asked them, is FEMA custodian of the water bottles, or are they now in the position of the Puerto Rico Drilling and Supplies Incorporated per the contract that was awarded April 4th, 2019? Here was the answer. The ownership of the bottles was transferred to PR Drilling Company to dispose of the water. Our original contract in April 4th, 2019, since then, FEMA increased the water bottles by 65%. They say they get a weekly status update from the contractor about the disposal process. Next question. Has FEMA placed any water bottles in the Dorado field? If so, how many has the agency placed there? The answer is no. FEMA says it contracted with PR Drilling and Supply plus the terms of the contract. Per the terms of the contract, it is the contractor's responsibility to go and get the water from FEMA from their warehouse and then dispose of it. So it's PR Drilling and Supply that chose this property in Dorado to put the water. I asked who owns the property, and I was told by the man who owns PR Drilling and Supply, I'm not going to give out that name. I know some of you have said there were rumors that maybe the land was owned by the governor's family or something. The man who owns PR Drilling and Supply says the governor of Puerto Rico, best he knows, has nothing to do with this land. The PR Drilling and Supply owner knows the landowner very well and says he's not associated with the government or anybody in government currently. All right, next question I had. Has FEMA placed any water bottles? No. Are the water bottles part of the same batch that was found in Ceiba? Remember last year, I don't know, 8 months or so ago, CBS News did a report about millions of water bottles sitting on a runway in Dorado, Puerto Rico, in Ceiba, at the airport in Ceiba? Here was the answer. The bottles in Dorado are not connected to the bottles found in Ceiba last year. The water that was in Ceiba is being disposed of by the same company, PR Drilling and Supply, and that contract for the Ceiba water bottles ends in September. Those bottles were stored in FEMA's warehouses during the 2018 hurricane season. FEMA maintains a rotating stock of commodities in warehouses nationwide. As they were in 2018, FEMA's warehouses in Puerto Rico remain stocked with commodities in order to respond to events in the Caribbean, including the U.S. Virgin Islands. Other commodities reach their shelf life. The agency has to dispose of them consistent with federal regulations. So FEMA is saying that the majority of the water bottles that we are seeing in Dorado and those that you saw in Ceiba were water bottles that were purchased after Hurricane Maria and put in a warehouse just so FEMA could be ready for another natural disaster. I'm going to tell you why some of that doesn't add up in just a moment. Next question. Will the disposal of the water, when will the disposal of the water in Dorado be complete? FEMA says the contract expires in November. However, due to the additional bottles, remember, they upped it 65%. So due to the additional bottles, the contractor could ask for an extension. So I picked up the phone and I called the man who owns Puerto Rico Drilling and Supply. his name, let me pull that up right here. David Ramirez. He's the president and the owner. I talked to him today, twice, talked to him yesterday. He said in Dorado, he first started putting water there on April 11th, 2019. He said they put the last pallet there on May 14th, 2019. He said the process is we have to perforate the bottles one by one, put it into a compactor and ship to the States or Peru, whoever's buying them. He said there is no repurposing plant in Puerto Rico that can actually melt the plastic, so they got to send it off the island. He said the water right now is being used to irrigate the field. He said back in April, they were actually giving the water out to other people to irrigate their fields or giving them to animals to drink, but he said they got some bad press about that, so they put a lid on it. They stopped that, and they're only irrigating the farm field that has been described to me as a graveyard of water. I am going to thread this post, and I'm going to send you some pictures that I was just sent today by another follower here on social media who actually went out to the site today and sent me some brand new pictures. And some of those pictures have an expiration date, and one of them has another date, which is very close to Hurricane Maria. I'll have more for you on that in a moment. The man who owns Puerto Rico Drilling and Supply said, David, I will point out to you, he said, I'm a small business owner. I went through the process with the federal government. All this money is staying here in Puerto Rico to help a small business owner. He said he is making $481,000 to dispose of the water bottles in Dorado, Puerto Rico, and the water bottles in Ceiba. The Ceiba thing, he said, is almost done. But Dorado is $481,000 that he's making. Now, I obviously wanted to know, how many bottles of water are we talking about? This is pretty staggering. There are, from the Ceiba, which again is an old story, Ceiba was 40 million bottles. But the Dorado story, which is new and current, the Dorado story is 16.5 million bottles, 16.5. So you add that up, we're talking 56.5 million bottles of water. So I went to FEMA today and I said, how much money did taxpayers spend on this water? They spend roughly $1.06 per liter, okay, per bottle. So imagine $56 million that will go to waste because the water was not used. FEMA now has, they told me, 5 warehouses in Puerto Rico. Before Hurricane Maria, they had 1. They now have 5 that are stockpiled with essential supplies. Some of you have said, why would there be an expiration date on water? Water doesn't expire. Manufacturers actually do put an expiration date. So some of the pictures, and I'm going to try and show it to you, you're probably not going to be able to see it, maybe hard to see. Some of the pictures actually do show these dates. One is an expiration and one is 10/13/17. So there's a picture, and again, I'll thread it in this tweet, where you can clearly see expires 4/19, 4 April 2019. But there's another picture that has a date on it, and I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this, but it's 10/13/17. 10/13/17. I'll put this picture in the thread. But 10/13/17 is only a few weeks after Hurricane Maria made landfall, and that was still at a critical period during this endless emergency when they were trying to get food and water to people who so desperately needed it. So the notion that FEMA is saying that all of this water that's now being disposed of was bought after Maria just so they could stock up warehouses to be better prepared, it doesn't jive with at least this one picture I have, which has this date of 10/13/17. Now, we don't know if that means that's when the water was shipped to Puerto Rico. We don't know if that means that's when the water arrived in Puerto Rico. But to see that would suggest that the water may have been there in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Maria, at a time when it was so critical to get water to people. So that is the very latest information that I have right now. 56.5 million bottles of water being disposed of, roughly $56 million of taxpayer money spent and gone to waste. But at any rate, I want to walk you through the process of how I got the information, and every question I asked and answer I got, I will include below this tweet new pictures that I got today.